Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. I have to do a follow up to the Chennai flood, not the Chennai flood, the preserving of Chariji's works and books. Because I put Sahaj Marg in the title and Chariji, and the picture was there of the books, and a lot of people didn't understand. I had a lot of Indians watching the video. The video wasn't intended for Indian people, at least most of them, Indian Abiyasis. It was intended for Western people. But people were asking, like, when did this flood happen? Like, they were thinking that I was, like, pleading for the saving of the books that were in the flood, and it wasn't. But the dodgy truther ended up finding the video and watching it. I was going to send it to him, but I didn't get around to it. But it just made them. It's got 3,000 views, and again, it's way more than I usually get on the Gratefullness meditation channel. I have the video already uploaded on my backup channel. I was going to put it on both channels. Like I'm not going to make a decision about it today. But I already did an audio, which you're going to hear, and it had 2,000 views, and I read some of the comments. But I want to preface this, do sort of an introduction. Today's Saturday, October 19th. I'll probably put the video up today, this video. But the other audio was from, I don't know, 3-4 days ago, when it had 2,000 views, and people were, coming in, and most of the comments were, they're in agreement of this issue, right? But the first thing I want to say is the facts are this. There is no republication of Chariji's works. Like, there has been a lot of content. Chariji put out a ton of content, and most of it was talks that he gave, and he was really good at public speaking. And some of the content exists on, like, there's a Sahaj Marg, official Sahaj Marg YouTube channel, and I don't know, I know that the person who runs that is kind of aware of the stuff with Dodgy, because the person or people who run that channel commented about it. And there are some leftover books that, like Fruit of the Tree and a few of these books that they're selling at the Heartfulness Life. And I think that Taji will keep My Master as a part of the Sahaj Marg literature. But every Chariji's birthday, they could re-release some of these works, right? There was all the stuff that was that was lost in the Chennai flood, and that was in 2015. And I didn't maybe specify that in the video, or people didn't understand the video. See, the people who do, Indian people really don't understand me, most of them, right? Like, they just don't, unless they've lived in America, and even then, right? It's just, there's a difference in the way that people express themselves, and, they don't understand my videos and the way I make my videos. They don't understand the truth community. They don't have a truth movement, right? But the simple fact is Chariji's works are gone. It's whatever we own and whatever's out there on eBay and, these other places, which, we should be, people who are doing Gratefullness meditation should be buying up, especially people in America. And then there's all these hippies, these boomer hippies that are dying, and their kids they don't even like Sahaj Marg. They don't even like the meditation. They don't even like their parents in many cases. So these parents don't have, these preceptors and people who have these books don't have anybody to leave these books to. And so they die, and then whoever's in charge of the estate can destroy the books, throw them away, and they can be sold maybe on, like a best case scenario, they end up on eBay and these places, Amazon and, stuff like that. And then, people like me can find them and buy them. And people like you, whatever. Some very variety of people are out there that are interested in these books. But if you're a person like this, and you might not like me, you might, whatever, I don't know, people that I used to know, and whatever's gone on, whatever their thing is. But if you don't want to give them to me, give them to somebody. Like, have a plan. Like, will your books to somebody so that they stay alive. Like, recognize the Chariji's works, because it's so bizarre to even think about. It would have been, when Chariji was alive, that he would be erased from the mission. He produced more content than any other master in the system, right? The other masters of the system. He produced far more content, Chariji did, than Babaji or Lalaji, and certainly Daji. I mean, his content is epic, too. I guess you could say Daji's produced a lot of content in terms of YouTube videos, but that content sucks, so, I don't know how, people don't watch it. But we used to watch. I think everybody watched everything Chariji did. At least there are some people that were really into it. Tens of thousands, maybe 20,000 people. Everything Chariji put out there, they would watch or whatever, video-wise, and then his talks, and then these printed books. But these books have disappeared, and many of these books have changed people's lives. And so, like I said, if it's meant that Chariji's works are supposed to be erased just because that's what's supposed to happen, sure. But if Daji's doing this because he's bitter and people are letting it happen, and what's going to happen when Daji falls apart, when he dies, or when whatever happens with him, right? When the heartfulness thing inevitably collapses because it sucks and nobody really, nobody's sincere and nobody's spiritual really wants anything to do with it, right? They're losing Abhyasis, which I talk about because people are commenting about that. There's less enthusiasm amongst existing Abhyasis, and the new people are not of a high standard in terms of their spiritual commitment and abilities and whatever spiritual, talent and, capital that they're bringing into this from past lives. They're not the kind of people that Chariji brought in. Like, he's going after stupid people, Daji is. And so, whether people agree with me about Daji or not, it's obvious that there is a truth to, the facts are that the Chariji literature has disappeared. And you can, think about it any way you want, but we're the ones who are going to have to preserve it, because the official organization, the Heartfulness organization, doesn't have any, they have control over it. They have the copyright. They have the ability to print Chariji's books, and we don't. And they're not reprinting any of this material, so they're just, suffocating it, right? They have the right. They're the only people that can reprint these things, and they're not going to do it, right? So all that stuff's going to be lost, and it shouldn't be, at least as far as I can tell, at least for the time being. If we have the opportunity to preserve it, we should, right? And so if you're a person who has a collection of books and you're getting older, you should think about that. If you guys who are in contact with preceptors or whatever, think about talking and have a conversation about this, because the idea that they can watch my videos, and whether they like me or not, they can see the merit in this idea to preserve his works, right? And there's a bunch of comments that came in after the comments I'm going to read. One person's like, I don't think this is being endorsed by Heartfulness. Let's see what Daji says, all this kind of goofy stuff. A few of these people who just don't understand what's going on, right? And like I said before, like, I realized that taking Daji down and getting rid of Daji, or whatever way, trying to get him out of that position, whatever that means, getting rid of Daji isn't the solution, because the system needs a master, and Daji is probably better than the people that he would leave running the system after he's gone. Like, he can't make a master, and without a master, the system it can't exist the way that they, it's imperative to the system. Like, we can just be placeholders until there's some organic way. Babaji, there's 13 years after Lalaji died before Babaji became his successor, his spiritual representative, and maybe something like that could happen. Like, I don't know. Like, it's beyond my ability to predict how they could right this ship, if it's going to be if this was part of a plan, and they have the plan here, which I hope it is, and it doesn't cost me or you or anybody anything just to believe that that's possible. Have some blind faith. Like, I'm going on blind faith that this is part of a plan, and because there's no reference to it in any of the books and any of the literature and any of the teachings of what would happen if the master fell. Like, they never even said that could happen, and what they would do about it if he did, right? Like, this is, it's just, like I said, blind faith that, something could happen, something good could happen, and that this could be reversed. I've said this over and over again. Like, Sahaj Marg's my thing. Like, this is, what my thing is. This, whatever this life is. And if it's crapped out, it's crapped out. Like, I can't fix that. Like, I can't fix what's happened now. I can't, there's nothing there. There's no blueprint. We can only preserve what was and wait for some sort of solution, that there's some sort of a plan. and it might not happen in my lifetime or whatever. Like, I don't know. But if Sahaj Marg's supposed to be around for 10,000 years or 20,000 years or whatever it is, and it's supposed to be the solution for humanity, then blind faith and hope in something unexpected or not predictable, or something that we can't conceive of, is all we have, right? Like, it's crazy is all we have, right? Crazy is all you got. But the alternative is just, there's no alternative. There's nothing that we can do now, and just accepting the Sahaj Marg is collapsed and it's over with. Well, despite the Heartfulness debacle and Daji just being sucky and not being a master, the transmission's still flowing, so we have that. But either way, it's going to do what it's going to do, and not like that's out of our hands. And so I think everyone can agree with that. If Chariji's works are not being reprinted, there's no plan for them to be reprinted. There's no, this is not what Daji does. He doesn't even really want to celebrate Chariji's birthday. That's, people can debate that, but that should be fairly obvious. And so if he's not going to reprint Chariji's books, he's not a fan of Chariji's books, then, and if 30 years, everyone will forget about Chariji. He'll be more or less erased from the mission. There's not really much there. There's some stuff in Chennai. There'll be like people there who are Brahmin and, who are, the people who will pass this on down to their kids. But once all the people who knew Chariji are gone and his works are gone, then he'll be erased from the mission, at least in terms of the material, the content that's available, and all the stories and all the way they helped people and the way he built the mission, the history, and how important he was to this, this organization. That'll all be gone. All the things that he established, the building of the ashrams, the business side of the organization, all that'll be gone, right? And people can then think about, why is that happening? Like, is it supposed to happen? Or this Daji, why isn't Daji a fan of Chariji? Like, why isn't he promoting him more? Why isn't he talking about it more? Why isn't he doing all the things that I'm saying here? Like, we all thought that was naturally going to happen. Nobody thought this was going to happen. And so the books that are printed, this is the only, this is Chariji's, works, and if they're worth saving, which to me they are, and to many of you they are, then we should save them so the next generation gets to benefit, because we don't know what's going to happen post-Daji, but the Heartfulness thing is doomed, and, people can feel about it any way they want, but it's, once you start asking questions, once you give yourself permission to question the master and not just, cult it, just not, blindly follow somebody who isn't worthy of being followed just because he's, the official person, and that the idea that, he could fall isn't a part of your, your upbringing and your mental, framework or whatever. But us people in the West, we didn't grow up with this guru culture. We ask questions, right? Western mind, Eastern heart. And Babji said, you should challenge your master. You should evaluate him. You shouldn't blindly accept somebody just because somebody else said he's a guru, just because even the other masters validated this guy. Yeah, sure, Chariji and Babji endorsed him, and whatever reason they did that, we don't know. Like I said, I don't think anybody could have succeeded Chariji. I think this was, this was bound to happen. And so there's that. So I got a message from the Daji truther. This guy is a person who's working to get this stuff out. Dear Brother Paul, just watched the full video. Superb. Please help preserve Chariji's and Sahaj Marg content. In the last, it is 3 a.m., so can't write much, but we'll share a few comments. Also remember Paji, he calls him Paji, gave instructions from Kana for all centers to trash old books, CDs, and DVDs, meaning Chariji's books and videos. As I may have already shared with you, I've picked up a couple of bags in a car trunk full of books and DVDs and CDs, some of them which was shrink-wrapped and brand new. They were just trashed. So he had told me about some of this stuff that had happened there. I think the CIC, the center in charge, did not have the heart to trash the books and just throw it in garbage, so he announced at Satsang that the books can be taken for free. If you chose, you can give a donation for some towards the ashram. I went and collected every single copy that I could. Some of them multiple, and most all that were brand new, so I could give to others, and just top of my collection of the books, DVDs, and CDs of Chariji. So this, I think, is back in 2016, right after the flood. And so most of us didn't even know this happened, right? But the books disappeared. They just weren't there anymore. Like when we went to Kana in 2020, I'm like, where's all the Chariji's materials? And I had no idea about Daji. Like I went there thinking Daji was the master. Of course, he rolled out that guy Diaper Baba and that whole thing. The gathering was weird. And then he started to fail on COVID and all these things. I didn't know about the Brighter Minds scam. I didn't know about any of this stuff. I didn't know. I had all hopes for Kamlesh. And, we were, I don't want to say friends, but, we were, friendly, right? And I had a high opinion of him. And I believed full-heartedly he was the master. And had accepted him as such, right? A number of good experiences. And I felt grateful for him, that we had somebody to continue on. But then I went to the bookstore, and there was just no Chariji there. No pictures of him, and no, books. Like, all of his materials, there was My Master, and, a few other books, but everything else was, he had produced the most content, and he was being erased. And they said, and just to confuse and deflect any questions that they had, 2 to 5% of the books, which were souvenirs or Babaji's books, and zero nothing of the Paji in the trash pile. In fact, Daji books were on sale and highly promoted, and this was like a trash corner, disgusting. Tragic that no one complained about it. That's what they don't do. Let's wait and see what Paji does in his visit to Chennai today or tomorrow, and the BMA, I'm not sure, Babaji Memorial Ashram. So I guess he's going there. And so I don't know when these books were all trash. Maybe this is recent, because he says Daji's books here. Anyways, there's that. Like, the books aren't being reprinted. Every Chariji birthday celebration that, Daji is forced to celebrate, there's no talk of reprinting any of these books. And many of these talks and books have changed our lives. And they're just epic, material. I don't think anybody would say that about Daji's books. I don't know. Like, it doesn't matter because, there's a break in the hierarchy of the masters. And so I did this other audio, so let me wrap this one up here. I'm not sure I totally remember what I said, but, this is a continuation of what I said in the other video. But there's a need to do this. Like, people are willing to do it. If you have this material, then just, put a little effort into making sure it survives. Find a worthy person to hand this material over to. I'm going to have to do this as I get older. And find somebody or some, place that's, going to preserve all this material. And so that, that people in the future will be able to read Chariji's books. And, it's a complete thing. Like, In His Footsteps books and his talks and, My Master and all the stuff, the Role of Master in Human Evolution, What is Sahaj Marg, these epic books. Some of these books are still available, like I said, in eBay. But if you read all of them, like there's, and you hear and you watch his talks and you get some of his DVDs and some of these things that he said, and you get, into his cadence and the way he speaks. And, it's like an egregore of content. It's a complete, it's all of it. It's like it's a whole, it's just, one piece missing, one book you don't read, something like this. The Heart-to-Heart books, the Principles of Sahaj Marg, these other books. Like, if you read all of these things and you get this wealth of knowledge that Chariji had and his ability to express what Sahaj Marg, the essence of Sahaj Marg was, and he was the best one at doing that. And Daji just isn't. Like, he sucks at it. And so, and he's not even doing that. He's got this thing called Heartfulness, and he's changed all these teachings, and he's reversed, a lot of the fundamental teachings of the system and things. And whether you see that or not, that's not my problem. But again, that's, you don't have to see that. You just have to see the need to preserve Chariji's works and whatever, Babaji's and just all this stuff. Even, to that extent, because Daji wants to be a founder. Like, he wants the only 2 birthdays to be celebrated are Lalaji's birthday and his birthday, the 2 founders. Lalaji founded this method, this system, but, it was really Babaji who was ordered to call it an organization, Sahaj Marg, and these things. And then, there's no founder in that sense because it's all a continuation of other things, right? Like, this word founder is a big deal now in modern, whatever it is, the financial world. but not here. Like it means nothing here because Babaji was ordered and Lalaji was ordered, and there's God and there's all these things. Like founder, like there's no ego stuff here. The master is devoid of ego, like just the minimal amount of ego. It's so that they can survive here, be a human being. You have to have some ego, but it's minimized. Where Daji is just looking for, I don't know what it is, pats on the back or recognition or acknowledgement, and it's just, it's pathetic. All right, here's the other audio that I did. Okay, just a little bit more to add here. So, before I go to the voiceover that I did the other day, a couple days ago. Something unexpected happened in the Sahaj Marg system when Chariji was just, all of his works, all of his talks and his content, and it seems like he would forever be producing content. Because even in his later years, even his last couple of years, he was still cranking out, a couple of talks here or there. And, there's just so much content. And all of us assumed that the following master would love Chariji as much as so many people loved him, right? Like, nobody thought the guy would hate him. The guy, or whatever whatever accomplishes problem is with Chariji, there's something there. But nobody thought the guy would want to erase his content. Nobody thought the person wouldn't be a fan of Chariji. The other previous masters all were glorifying and, presenting the content that the previous masters had left behind. Chariji had said that everyone should read Babaji's 5 books and complete works of Ramchandra, Volume 1, the 5 books he wrote, like once a year. He recommended preceptors read those once a year, right? And he quoted from them, talked about Babaji all the time, and, expanded on Babaji's initial simple teachings. And it was Babaji, 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 just like Babaji talks about Lalaji all the time and all the things that Lalaji did for him. And, the rest of us would talk about Chariji and his teachings. I quote Chariji quite often. A lot of stuff that I present are things that I learned from him in one way or another, either through meditation or through his teachings, or a combination of the two things, right? And so many of us had that experience with Chariji that his works have affected us in a positive way. But nobody thought that the mission would change into something else and take on a new name and get all culty, and the guy running it is just makes decisions that are constantly head scratching, and a lot of lying and deception and scamming and all these things, right? Nobody saw that coming. And whether you can admit to that or not, I don't care. But at least you have to be able to see that Chariji's works are at threat of disappearing, and they easily can be saved, because there are so many books out there and DVDs and CDs that are out there that some of them, can be preserved in one way or another, right? There must be ways that people can save these things, country by country, and so that other people have access to them. Because there might be a point where, this humanity catches up to the teachings of the Sahaj Marg system and all of Chariji's explanations. Without Chariji's work, Lalaji produced almost no real written material, and barely anybody understands what he wrote. And Babaji was, he brought Chariji around because Chariji was such an excellent speaker. And Chariji was able to explain Babaji's simple teachings in a profound way that made them more accessible to people. And so if you take away Chariji's works, then, people, there's so much of a gap there. And certainly Daji isn't filling that gap because he's taken it in a completely different direction. And, you can see that if people can see that whether they want to or not, that's up to them. But it's there for people to see. But either way, Chariji's works are essential to understanding the other aspects, some of the more complex or more simple teachings that have to be expanded upon. Babaji was a man of few words. And so Chariji is essential. The reason that he was somebody who cranked out so much content is content was necessary, right? So it just takes a little effort on people's parts to do something about that. It just takes a little effort. And just, some forethought as you enter into your older years and you're settling up your your accounts in your life, and you have these valuable assets, and some of them are valuable for different reasons, and the Chariji books and these other things are valuable. And at the very least, you can ask your relatives to make sure they just don't chuck them. Your kids, put something in your will, like sell the stuff on eBay and put it out there so people can, whatever you need to do to make sure that these books just don't disappear altogether. This collection of works that you've benefited from, think about what's going to happen to them after you die, right? I mean, it's a very simple, way to continue this tradition or continue this work and save some of this stuff that's at threat of being lost. Okay, so here's the other voiceover I did the other day. Okay, so I just noticed my video for, let me just close this panel here. I just, Adobe just updated all their stuff, stuff I use for editing. I got a couple of comments to read for you. So I put out this video about preserving Chariji's materials. And, the literature and the work, and not just Chariji's, anything to do with Sahaj Marg, some of Babaji's stuff as well, but mostly Chariji. And I looked at the Gratefullness meditation channel. I put it up on there, and it had 2,000 views already. And most of the comments were positive and supportive. There's one that isn't, which I'll read you in a moment. But this, my videos there usually get at most 400 views. The average meditation gets about 150 views, so I don't think I've had very many views there. I kind of wish I was going to put out my backup channel, which is already uploaded to my backup channel. It's just unlisted. And I now kind of thinking I should have put it there first. Although, this channel's monetized, and it's good to make some money for YouTube, to keep the ads off the videos, the meditation videos. And so there was a couple comments. There was a comment here, a lot of positive comments. So the big comment was here, though. The person said, let me see if I can find this. Here it is. The person said, thank you, Paul, for bringing this in the open. If not for your videos, I was surely unaware about the entire scenario where Chariji is being undermined and indirectly erased, which I am sure they'll never be able to. They'll be able to. Your videos were an eye-opener, and that's when I started to notice the stark difference in the affairs related to the mission. Everything is so hush-hush and weird with heartfulness. When you notice deeply shocking to many senior Abhyasis from Babaji and Chariji's time, missing nowadays. Totally new crowd, new rules, hardly everyone talks about Chariji, etc. So many weird things I can't even write down here. However, the overseas Abhyasi count is dwindling for sure, and the only thing Heartfulness now wants to introduce new Abhyasis. The SNP, self-nominated preceptor concept, is the one that blows it out of the park. Imagine reading a few books prescribed and then taking a written test you pass as a preceptor. That's just freaking hilarious. Nowhere near what Babaji and Chariji ever prescribed. In fact, Babaji was very clearly said that only someone who has crossed the fifth point is to be made a preceptor, or else it would harm the person himself and the Abhyasi. There's a YouTube channel called Sink His Story where this is explained clearly. Anyway, this is all too weird and can't be expressed here. Finally, yes, we need to have Chariji's works and do our part as sincere Abhyasis of Sahaj Marg. And so I got a long comment. I'm not going to read it all because it's just rambling, classic cult member kind of stuff here. So a person writes this to me, randos. This is when I'm like, oh, these people are showing up, which I don't really want, but it is what it is. Why are you against Daji? It seems that under the guise of false heading, protect Sahaj Marg content, you are trying to defame Daji. If I am not wrong in your past, you are. I can tell you right now, this is why I'm, mocking your comment. Because, you have no ability to read me or the situation. And, there's plenty of information out there. You haven't heard of me or whatever. It says, why are you against Daji? It seems under the guise of false heading, you are trying to defame Daji. If I'm not wrong in your past, when Chariji was alive, you were close to him personally. I really wasn't. Chariji sort of, I would say, I mean, I'm introverted, and Chariji had people around him all the time. So I was never fully comfortable. I had a few good conversations when he made me a preceptor, and another time where I was able to express myself in gratitude for what he'd done for me. But I was much closer in terms of my, Daji once told me, well, personally, now you are unable to get near Daji, and hence you this anger in you, which shows your ego is hurt. You are trying to take revenge. I'm going to tell a story about Daji's. He just made this like totally BS video out there, which I'll talk about, which is about him sleeping in his farm. And I have a whole, experience with him. And I'm going to talk about, he was impressed with the Tulsi plants I was growing. And I went to see him. And, I've told this story a number of times in my Journey series. And we had a very unpleasant interaction. But at the end of it, he said I could come into his office anytime I wanted. Like I was given one of these free passes. I never had that under Chariji. Like I could just walk into Daji's office. This is when Chariji was still alive. But Daji said, come back and see me anytime you want. Don't bother with, just come on in and see me. That I could just go visit him and talk to him and be around him, right? Which is, I never had that. People had that with Chariji, and I didn't have that. And so it never meant anything to me. Because when I needed to see him, I would see him. I didn't want to bug him, and I wouldn't have wanted to bug Daji. But this was such an unpleasant interaction. I was like doubting everything because he was such a failure. He told me I was, this whole thing about misreading my condition and things. But even that I, ended up overlooking, right? I had a number of these weird interactions with him. So the personal stuff, which you guys have heard of my Journey series, there's lots of personal stuff and reasons I could have been mad at him or, questioned him. But it wasn't until the Brighter Mind scam when he was doing stuff organizationally, and I saw that he was throwing Chariji under the bus and minimizing Chariji's accomplishments that I ended up, all of the things that these videos, right? So you guys know. So the person misread the thing. So this person's idea was that I used to be able to go see Chariji anytime I wanted, but Daji wouldn't let me do that, so I'm in a huff on making shit up, right? Which is like silly. And so now you're unable to get near Daji, and hence your anger in you, which shows your ego is hurt. You are trying to take revenge. History repeating again and again. When Babaji was made successor of Lalji, many hated him. Now also there are many people who still think that Babaji was not the real successor of Lalji. Still, they're not. Those people are all dead. Some still think that Baba Maha Maham Lal was the successor of Lalji, who is one of the people who does Whispers of Brighter World messages. One of my close relatives was an old Indian, but somehow he started hating Chariji, and he thinks that he has fallen. He heard some false rumors, gossips about Chariji, and started hating him. Now we are following Sister Kasturi Satsang group. Now he is following Sister Kasturi Satsang group. Recently I asked him what his opinion of Daji is. He says upset that Daji introduced a new name, Heartfulness. I asked him what is wrong with that. There is no clear answer for that. I told that Babaji also created a new organization called Sri Ramchandra Mission. Yeah, but that was the organization, right? You just admitted that he's created a new organization called Heartfulness. Dude, you're floundering here. I didn't read this part. He also renamed it as Sahaj Marg, which was different from the earlier names, Santamant, created by Lalji. There was no organization under Lalji. There was no registered organization. It was a bunch of people that came to Lalji's house. So Babaji was instructed by Lalji through intercommuning. Daji wasn't instructed. None of these things came from, there's Whispers of the Brighter World messages. There's no Whispers of the Brighter World messages where Babaji said, now name this thing Heartfulness. Babaji didn't do anything. He was ordered to do everything by Lalji. The logo, the emblem, the mission emblem. Lalji said, this is what I want you to make the emblem. And he showed him a picture in meditation. Lalji said, I want you to register the organization. I want you to call it Sahaj Marg. Babaji did it. Kamlesh asked everybody who was in the mission to come up with a new name that was more user-friendly. So one of the things was there was these people in Australia who they wanted to build a meditation hall. And the government heard Sahaj Marg and said, no, you can't. They approved it at first, but then, they said, no, we're not having any of that cult stuff here. And so the Australian person went back. This is when Chariji was still alive, and said to Daji, this is what happened. Daji said, why did you call it Sahaj Marg? Why not call it heart meditation? And so Daji was saying, to bring new people in, we have to, especially Westerners, we have to sort of rebrand this system. And he asked for people to come up with a name. And Heartfulness was given by some clown in America who will, I think most people know who it is. And there was other suggestions. And Heartfulness existed as as a term out there. Huffington Post had a page called Heartfulness. There was lots of Heartfulness things out there. And so I said, why pick something that's already being used by other people? So I thought it was going to fail. And they did a good job of owning that term, of creating Heartfulness meditation. Like, they did a good job of that. But Heartfulness meditation already exists as a term and was used by various other people. And Daji just came in and glommed that term. They did a good job of it. But there was no need to do it because Westerners don't like Daji. There's no Americans here anymore. Most of them have quit. Some of them have aged out. Most of them have lost enthusiasm. But it's all Indians here in America. It's not playing in Europe. Daji's not even, trying to bring these people in anymore. The mission isn't expanding there because they've changed the name to Heartfulness. So there's no reason to change the name. Because Indians don't have a problem with Sahaj Marg. Indians are fine with it. So, he has just basically Indians now because of going full Hindu and going full religious and some of this other goofy stuff he's done. Western people aren't going to buy that Brighter Minds scam and that other bullshit, right? So this person, let me reread what they said there. This person saying that Babji also created a new organization called Sri Ramchandra Mission. No, he was ordered to do it by Lalaji. And Babji wasn't somebody who, had ego, or he intercommuned with Lalaji. There's no such interactions for Kamlesh. There's no whispers of the brighter world message. As soon as Chariji died, he said, let's change the name. And he built a second organization. And so all these people who kind of now are less into it, right? And so it said, when Lalaji was prescribed methods based on Abhyasi, Samskars, education, and mental condition, so I think some of the followers of Lalaji also might have hated Babji for creating another organization and a different method. You're 100% wrong, right? This person hasn't heard any of my Journey series or any of these things, right? That he goes into this thing about all these people rebelling against. So here's the Tuktaji. What do you think the merging of Tuktaji, Maharaj, and Daji is not right on, is a right one? What is wrong with it? Because it didn't happen, right? Like, the Tuktaji people never folded in. So the only reason for him to do that is for Tuktaji to merge in Kamlesh, is for the people to follow Kamlesh. Because now they're worshiping Tuktaji and them. Like, the reason that, Babaji said to Chariji, I've now merged in you. And the reason Lalaji said, I've merged in you, to Babaji, is because there are people following Lalaji would then see Lalaji and Babaji. And the people following Babaji would see Babaji and Chariji, right? Where has Daji ever once said that Chariji merged in him? Where's that? Where's that interaction? Where's that sitting? Daji's never once said that Chariji is inside of him, merged in him. Or that Babaji has. The one guy he has said is merged in him is Tuktaji. And Tuktaji has 250,000 followers. And they called bullshit on that. And like I said, it wouldn't have worked out because they celebrate Tuktaji's birthday on the 30th of April 30th. And that's Babaji's birthday. So it's goofy. It's silly, and it didn't work out. Like, I give you the evidence right there. He left Chariji off the list, right? Chariji wasn't on the list of the divine hierarchy. But, this person is, they had one video, simple kind of person. Let me get into the other story. So the Daji Truther sent me a video of Kamlesh going to the New York Stock Exchange. And it's some sort of official video, and he's out there, one of the worst places in the world. Like, as the world economy collapses, we know about what Babaji said was going to happen to all the various, I mean, what's all these upheavals that are going to happen? And he's talked about money power and things like that in Whispers of the Brighter World over and over again. And so there's that, right? But it's just goofy. And then he sent me the Dodgy Truth. That was maybe 2 weeks ago. And I don't care about this stuff anymore, and I don't really want to cover it. I don't really, I don't search any of these things out. But if they're sent to me, I'll look at it, whatever. And it's like it's coming for a reason, right? It's more out of duty now than any personal. Like, I just don't want to waste my time on this stuff, right? But he had a video of Dodgy saying that when he was a young man, when he came back from college, he had started being an Abiasi early on, whatever, when he was in college. And when he came back from college, he would sleep in his farms. He uses the word farms, plural. That he wouldn't go to sleep in his house. I think he came from money, whatever it was. He's saying he came from some rural farming village. I'm not sure how accurate that even is. But, it was in the Gujarat where it's a money-making place, right? So he's a pharmacist. He's studying pharmacology. And then he started, this is back in probably around 1979, 77, whatever. When he started, he only met Babaji a few times. And he would sleep out in the fields and then meditate, right? As a young person. But, later on he would say that he would tell the Danish people they tried to kill Chariji. So, when you first meditate, there's some effect, but you're not, you're just learning and you're just beginning to do that. But he said he wouldn't sleep inside. He'd sleep under the stars and he'd meditate. And then he said the yields of the crops was 3 or 4 times more than all the surrounding farms, all the other farms in that area. So his farm, because he was sleeping there and meditating there, was 3 or 4 times more the yield. He said we'd need nothing extra, only that I was meditating, and only for a few days, right? And like a few days a year, he'd come home for a break or whatever, a couple times, whenever, when they had the crops planted, right? That you wouldn't do it just when there was nothing there. They have a rainy season. I'm not sure what it is in Kerala, but in the rest of India, they only have a short period of time where they have rain for the crops, right? Like they have these, and there's probably places that have different rain schedules. I'm not sure because he's on the West Coast. But either way, he'd come home from college and he'd meditate in the fields. And they didn't have to add anything extra, which means, pesticides or, nutrition. I mean, any of the stuff that you would add, like, maybe even water. Like it was just, they would use his meditation and that would give them 4 times the yield. So he said if you put 2 plants side by side, there's research that if you curse one plant and you praise the other plant, that they'll grow. If you compare the growth side by side, it's amazing how different it is. But it wouldn't be like that. You couldn't put them side by side because it's vibrations. He's just silly. Like, there is evidence about this. I went to him about etheric gardening. Let me tell my whole story here, because it's imperative to show what a kind of a liar he is about this. So, in 2012, they had a Master Chariji had the American gathering in Chennai ashram, the Manapakam. And so the Americans came to India to have an American gathering because Chariji was his health was so bad he couldn't come to America. Every year we would have a national gathering. It was always when Chariji was in America, right? Usually in the summer. But Chariji couldn't travel anymore, so we had the American gathering in Chennai. And this is, Kamlesh had been nominated, and he was going to be Chariji's successor. And Kamlesh gets up and gives a pretty great talk, a talk that I enjoyed. The talk was about, he talked about a woman walking by Chariji, that this woman came from some area, it must have been in India somewhere, where there's no preceptor. And these, elders in the mission came to Chariji and said, can we make this woman a preceptor? Because there's no preceptors there in that area. And Kamlesh read her condition, and she was completely gross, like she was heavy with spiritual grossness. And Chariji said, yeah, let's do it. And Kamlesh was like, I'm sitting there going, what is this crazy old man doing? And he said by the time she walked by him, like Chariji, met her, and she walked by him, Chariji had already completely cleaned her whole system and was already starting the yatra from point 1 to point 2. And it was kind of an interesting, idea, but none of the stuff he says now is believable because he says stuff, sensationalized things, and, I mean, I don't believe anything he says. It might be true, but I don't trust the guy, right, because of obvious what's happened. But he's given this talk, and it's a really good talk, and he had not been such a good public speaker before this. He certainly was better at this talk than he is now. Like, his talks now are, like, stupid and, like, inarticulate at times, and sometimes he's just babbling. But back then, he was becoming a good speaker because Chariji was still alive, right? Chariji was still propping him up. And, and there was every chance that he had the potential to end up being better and better, but it just didn't take, right? But then all of a sudden, they were recording this talk, and they switched the reels. So it was 2012, but they were still using like VHS or some shit to record them. Like there was digital videos out, cameras out there, but Chariji always insisted on having the best technology. But either way, they had to take one tape out because it was a long talk, and put a second one in. And he paused, and then completely different, whatever it was, like a different train of thought. He said, you shouldn't grow food. Like this is a guy now saying that he used to sleep in the fields. He said you shouldn't grow your own food. Why grow your own food when you could just go to the grocery store and buy? Why grow a tomato when you could just go to the grocery store and buy a tomato? Like this is what he was talking. Like he starts saying this. So at that time, I was in a previous marriage that, my ex and my family were living on a farm. We had been, regular Americans, grew up in suburbs, didn't have farming experience. And, based in just the teachings and all these things that certainly the Whispers of the Brighter Worlds later would confirm this stuff, right? But we started, now, of course, people are all freaking out about food security, and a lot more people are growing food and are aware of these things. But given some of the prophecies and just, the conditions of the world that were happening for kids in America and, in terms of the way they were growing up and the internet and the way technology was negatively affecting everybody, this idea was that we should be in our farm. And so my family and I were trying to create a farm and, farming environment, learn these skills, trying to figure out a way to make an income off of it, right? That's when I started the YouTube channel. I was writing books and things. And there was this, element of that, right? I was trying to build a private counseling practice and these things, while doing the farm. And we were talking to people about some of the things we learned. And I had all this research that I had done and things that were consistent with the Sahaj Marg system. The things that Daji's saying now about etheric gardening, I already knew about. And so we were getting a hard time from all these people saying we should just be doing what everyone else is doing, even though the teachings of the system and the predictions. I mean, this is back now, 2011. It's after Whispers of the Brighter World had been released, and so 2012 actually, and so Whispers of the Brighter World was released in 2005, which confirmed because we started the farm, right at that time, and we were looking to start a farm, those few years, like before Whispers came out, and then Whispers came out. But anyways, my family and I were getting a hard time about it. And when he said this thing, there was only one group of people who were Americans, or there's a guy who had an organic farm. He was doing organic stuff and biodynamic stuff. And this guy owned, like, he made granite signs. He had a business, but he also had a house right near the ashram, and he was growing a lot of food in his backyard. He was in charge of the container gardens. Later on, I would find out there's these containers of 5-gallon buckets that had stuff growing in front of the offices across from the meditation hall, right? And so there was no reason for him to say this to anybody else but us, right? And my ex was just oblivious to it, saying, "Oh, that's not about me," she was not willing to, just how she was. So. And I was like, well, of course it's about it. This was what we're doing. We're growing food, and everyone knows we're growing food. We're the people doing that. And he just, said stuff that was undermining an already difficult situation because, we were trying to convince other people that we should all be doing this, right? And now, of course, or at least there'd be some sort of support. And then after Daji said this thing, he's going to be Chariji's successor, it meant like people already against it were like, see, we were right, you were wrong kind of thing, and weren't open to doing this stuff. I wrote a proposal to the Molina ashram. And of course, now they're doing all this stuff. They're putting food in all these ashrams. And Kamash himself is big into the whole force by heartfulness. But back then, I was ahead of him. Like I was a pioneer. I was groundbreaking some of the stuff, right? And so what I'm saying is him saying that back when he was in college, he would sleep in the fields under the stars and the plants would take off. Where was this story before? Like all of a sudden now the story comes out. When I tried to talk to him about this stuff, first of all, well, let me say what happened. So I get really pissed off. So I go to see the guy because I'm like, he's completely, screwing me over and what we're trying to do as a family. And, it's already a struggle. I mean, because everything was going on. It was a bad marriage. It was a bad situation. And so, it was trying to homeschool the kids and live on a homestead and reinvent ourselves with, our primary organization criticizing us and telling us it wasn't right. Chariji he gave talks about these things and there was support in Whispers of the Brighter World, but people didn't read the books or listen to the talks, so they were not, and they didn't want to hear this because they wanted to live their modern day lives. Most of them were pushing off the prophecies in the Sahaj Marg system, all these things. So I went to talk to him, and I'm sitting in there's a place where, called the Master's Cottage, where Chariji would sleep at the ashram, and people would come see him there. And Kamlesh was in there. So I'm sitting there waiting, and the energy there, the condition there is so great that my anger dissipates. Like I'm just like, really, angry. Like anger that I don't get angry like that anymore, kind of thing, right? This was, me in my 30s or whatever it was, right? And so, this is 20 years ago. Or whatever, 20, whatever. This is 2024, and that was 2012. So I guess I was in my 40s or whatever it is, 50s. Anyway. And so he comes out, and I explained everything to him. I said, this is what we're trying to do. This is how it's, we're basing this in the Whispers of the Brighter World messages and the other things that they said, that there's going to be a time where people are going to need to reclaim these things. And he said how wonderful it is we were doing this, right? Like he was enthusiastic about it, and he was convinced it was a good thing. And at that time there was some controversy about my family. I don't know, bad reputation thing. Some of the stuff got back to me. I never really understood what it was, but there was some negative narratives about us, and people must have talked to him, because then he reversed himself, and he he was just not into this, whatever it was, right? And so I don't know. I don't know what went on. It's an internal world. But there was a time where we came back in 2013, I think it was, the very next year. And I had all this information I wanted to present to Kamlesh, because Chariji was really getting old. He wasn't going to be around much longer. And, he wasn't doing things like he used to. He was just, all he could do was be the master and do the spiritual work, but he wasn't making decisions about the future. Kamlesh was obviously going to be a successor. And so I wanted to present all the information. And some of this was about etheric gardening, where, it's something that I still do. My wife and I are now building a, much better farm with much more experience and things. And we're building food forests and all these other things, right? And so when we plant food, it's like you pray over the food. We pray over the plant. Not just things that are for food, but whatever it is. And you exchange energies. This is based in the Findhorn model from Scotland, where these sort of New Age people started to interact with the spirits behind the plants. Now, Babaji says in Whispers of the Brighter World, he talks about the spiritual energy behind what he calls the plant kingdom. And so there's etheric energy behind everything. And so if you connect with that energy, there's pranic healing, which is something my family and I were learning about there as well. Exchanging this pranic energy, which is similar to the Pranhuiti that you get in It's, for healing, but it's, the prana energy, right? The Pranhuiti is a transmission. And so if you allow this energy to flow through into the plants and you connect with the plants, and it becomes this symbiotic relationship, right? And there's lots of things I know about this. And so I was going to present this to Daji, amongst other things about homeschooling and all these things about, building these kind of, what he's doing with the Brighter Mind scam, something that's real, that would be real and authentic, not some, bullshit thing that he's doing there with those kids, right? With scam. And so I had all this stuff to present to him. I had all these things. And I sat down, and like these two people who were, sort of always against me, they were original preceptors in my center. This one woman who gossiped about me, and she was just a horrible person, as in terms of being, like not an elder in the spiritual community, fear-based person. And I got into it with a little bit of some things with her husband. There was my preceptor I started with, and there was tension between them, and they linked me to him. Like I was one of his people, and they were, goofy stuff, like petty stuff, right? But they were there, and they were two of the worst people. Like she had said that I shouldn't have been made a preceptor, and they just happened to be there, and it wasn't something that Daji had planned, right? And this other guy who I got into it with the UN just recently was there, and like we went back and forth about the inappropriateness of Sahaj Marg going to the UN, which is still true today. I was right about that. I was right about all this stuff, right? But they were both there, and I'm like, oh. And then Kamish comes in. He doesn't hear a word I have to say, and he just lectures us about farm and this stuff, mostly negative, sort of embarrassing me in front of my kids and things. And it was so poorly handled. I'm like, this guy's the master. Some of it was just stupid. All of it was wrong, right? And so I left being like, oh my God, this guy, I was stunned at how badly he handled it. And I'm like, what's the future here? And, what I was looking for is to see if there was going to be any communal type of situation, in terms of the organization, support for what we were doing. And he just killed that. And I was grateful for that, at least. So then I was like, I can move on. I tried to get this stuff in front of him, right? I tried to tell him the stuff that I did everything I could to get this information. It was like a research project that so many of my viewers find valuable. So many people find this information valuable here. But it was rejected by the organization, which is great for me now because Heartfulness is a joke and Daji's a joke, right? So, it didn't matter. I would have just been banging my head against the wall. When you're talking to dopes who, aren't connected to the real essence of the system anymore, it's just frustrating, right? Like it's not, we didn't have any kind of a, it was doomed, right? And so some time went by, my family and I left, and we camped for a while, we came back, and we were renting from somebody who was in the administration building, and Daji was building his own vice presidential offices, and he came by, and we saw each other, we said hello, and when he used to come into the meditation hall, this is one of the things that sort of got me back on his, where after I had a few negative interactions with him and really questionable things that he did. But when he'd walk into the meditation hall, my heart would feel good because there was a successor to Chariji. And he had this energy and you could see the work was being done. And I felt good about it. And I told him that, even despite him, mishandling this thing, I got over my personal feelings. I took the high road. And I said, when you go walk into the meditation hall, my heart feels good and I'm happy that we have a successor, which was generous on my part, given what he had said and done and, all these things. It was a huge blow at the time, really depressing and all these things, right? And it began a process of divorce, which was also, wonderful for me. So like a lot of good things came out of it. But at the time, they weren't that. And so he said, there's these buckets in front of the administration building. I'd like you to take these things over, like start growing things in there. And he arranged for some local person who was one of these people whose family lived at the ashram. He didn't speak really English, but we had a way of communicating. And together we grew a bunch of great food there. And he said he also had a farm, an organic farm, that right across from the Lalaji Memorial Omega School. He had 12 acres there, 9 acres or something. And we went to that. And he was into growing food, which was mind-blowing considering what he had said to us before, right? Like he was trying to do these things. Like, he had been a little bit of a gardener before that, right? But like he had said all these other things about it, and certainly nothing about etheric gardening. And so we grew these Tulsi plants, and the Tulsi plants were phenomenal. And it was because I was praying and doing these things. We're using the energy, plus the energy that was there in the ashram. And I knew about this system from the Fintorn people, and I changed it and added things to make it more conducive to the Sahaj Marg meditation and relationship, right? But it was a thing that anybody could use, and I talked about it on some of my earlier videos on my regular channels. But this is going to go both in the Journey series and to be a standalone video. And the guy who was in charge of the garden was a guy who made a lot of money in America and retired. He was probably in his 50s, 40s. He had kids. His oldest kid, I think, was the same age as my youngest son, and they had hung out. And we became good friends. This guy was a really sweet, nice person. He also acted as Daji's secretary. He was like, he personally handled Daji's, Kamlesh's communications. And he comes up to me and says, "Oh, he wants some of your seeds, your Tulsi seeds, right?" Because we saw each other, and Daji looked at the Tulsi plant and said, "I've never seen Tulsi this great, right?" And I brought these organic seeds, and I was growing this. There's Krishna Tulsi and Rama Tulsi, and some other, I forget the name, began with a K. This Tulsi, and it was amazing. Like, it was the best Tulsi you'd ever seen. And the leaves were like huge, like they're the size of your hand, right? Tulsi's a holy basil, it's these basil leaves. And I said, "Do you want to eat one of them?" Because like that was part of what we were doing. We'd heard about Tulsi from some healthcare people. And this one guy they had this like health farm. They've sold it. These people, they're in Costa Rica, but they had a couple of Tulsi plants there. And he said he ate 5 or 6 leaves every day. And it was one thing that he would not get rid of. It was Tulsi, because Tulsi is an adaptogen. And, this whole stuff with organic Indian and Tulsi tea, my wife now, we both take that regularly in different ways. And so Tulsi is we named our dog Tulsi, right? It's just, it's a whole thing, right? And when I was doing the etheric gardening, there was the most energy I felt was from the Tulsi plants. And I watched this movie about how Tulsi was created. Krishna took this saint and put her spirit into the plant, right? Like it was a whole thing. She married this demon, and it was like the demon, she was propping him up with her devotion and made him indestructible. And Shiva and Vishnu couldn't kill him. And so Vishnu comes down. Vishnu, who's it would later incarnate as Krishna, and he has to trick her. And then she's like heartbroken, so he, makes her into a Tulsi plant and said that you'll, spread this energy, and all these Indian households have Tulsi in their houses, right? And so Daji said that he grew up, wherever he did, in some rural, area, and everyone had Tulsi plants in all 4 corners of their house, so that the vapors, when the wind blew, it would go into the house from whatever direction, right? And so we were talking about the Tulsi, and then he got into this other stuff, and he was basically implying that I was stuck in point 5, and I'm not going to get into that whole part of the story, but it got weird, right? And I started to talk to him about etheric gardening, the very stuff that he's talking about here. But it's much more sophisticated than the dopey shit he's saying. And it's stuff that would have helped him with his forest, and, they can do it other ways and whatever. But he wasn't on board. He didn't care about that stuff back then. Like he was, he had a little bit of a garden, and he had a little bit of these things, but he didn't care about any etheric energy or any meditating in the fields. He didn't know about any of that stuff. And so now all of a sudden he's like, "Oh my God, we had these things 4 times the yield." Like he just makes shit up, right? Because this could have been a conversation where I say, "This is how we're farming." And he says, "When I grew up, I used to sleep in the fields, and it was just like you're saying." And then, he would have came back with that. But he was shutting it down. And then the other part was about homeschooling and teaching kids with a Gurukulam type of situation, where there'd be this, ashram-like environment where there'd be farming. The kids would grow up on a farm and learn how to farm and connect with nature. And they'd sleep out under the stars and do these things, right? And I was trying to tell him about that, and he shut me down. And so, then he came up with the Brighter Minds thing, which is sucks. Like, it's nothing like the Gurukulam thing. So both these things were things that he's, doing now with the Brighter Minds scam. And now he's doing this thing called Forest by Heartfulness, and I'm glad he's doing it. Like, I'm not, against any of those things. I'm glad if anybody would do it. But he had a chance to make it better, and I had insights to it. Not because it came through me. Because it came through me doesn't matter. Like, I wasn't important. But I had information that no one else in the mission had. No one else in the world had. It was a, experience with this stuff, right? Eventually when we get back to doing the farming, I'll write, make videos on it, maybe write something about it, probably just make videos and show people how to do it more, the etheric gardening. But basically what you do is you just, sit in front of the plant, stand in front of the plant, and you connect with the energy of the plant. You're like praying, it's like transmitting, but it's connecting with it. And like you're opening a line of communication that, if the plant needs something, they'll let you know. And then, the plant will provide for you because you're, putting energy into it. We're working together in a symbiotic way, right? You're connecting to the plant on an etheric level, on a spiritual level. The energy behind the plant, the spiritual consciousness behind the plant. And so, whatever way you do that, and I have specific ways to do it, and I'll get into that more in some other videos, but, that's basically it. Like, there's enough information there. But anyways, I just wanted to point this out. Like, Daji's changed his whole story. Like, the time that I talked to him about farming and these things, he was growing some plants, he had some gardening experience. And maybe he grew up in a, farm area. And he's been into it at the ashram. And now, they're realizing, it used to be, I don't know if they talk about it now, but Babaji's predictions and Whispers of the Brighter World, maybe Daji doesn't even believe in those predictions, but they have food at the ashrams. But America, I put this proposal out in the Molina ashram. Let's get back to that. And I said, we could turn this into, tea gardens, plateau gardens, cascading gardens, right? What you do is you build a flat area, you push the soil down, you secure it, and you build a flat area on the hill. And then you walk down, and there's another flat area, and it cascades down, and the water runs from the top to the next part to the next part, right? And then there's some stairs and things. You see these tea gardens in India that they build into the hill. And there's just these plateaus, these flat areas you create, like steps, big giant steps down the side of the mountain. And, food forests was something I was researching about, where you would plant food, trees, fruit trees and nut trees and things like that, and then other types of perennial and annual type stuff underneath it, and you throw seeds out, and there'd be healing herbs and whatever. You do these seed bombs and you throw them out. Some of the plants were symbiotic, and they grow well with each other, and you would do these types of things, and it would just keep on producing every year. And there would be inputs coming in, like on top you built a pond, and the pond would maybe have some ducks in it, and the ducks would provide nutrition, and the water then would roll down the hill, and it would keep it's a whole system, right? And it's automatic. You have to do very little. And then, of course, there'd be the energy at the ashram, the etheric gardening. So I proposed all these things. And they said, someone came back to me and said, that's a great idea. Why don't you buy the land across the street and do it there? And I'm like, I'm already building a farm, and I already got, I'm covered. I'm doing this for the rest of you, right? Like, if you believe in the prophecies and the literature, Babaji said everyone's going to have to learn to work with their hands. Like, it's going to be a time where there would be, the food shortages, and there's already issues. Food shortages already are a big thing in India. And I'm like, we need something in America. And so, I said, all right, whatever. I did what I could do. And years later, my brother said that he was walking around the ashram. My brother was the caretaker of the ashram. And he was walking around the ashram, and Chariji looked down the same hill that I was proposing to do this on, and he said, there should be plateau gardens here. And my brother, because I was talking to him about it, I told him the story. He didn't listen to me most of the time. Like, he was mostly him talking, waiting for me to, when I talked, he was just waiting for, to say what he was going to say. But he didn't really listen to me. But the one time he said, what did you say about that? And then he told the story. That Chariji looked at the hill and said the exact same thing I did. But now they've sold that property, and all the energy that was in it, the charge, or either that they're not using the property. I don't know what they've done with the property. But there's no place in America where, the American mission has been decimated. So India, they have these ashrams that are, fortified with food, but the rest of the world's screwed. The rest of us, we don't have a community. We don't have, all these people have left. Daji's weakened. No one with any sense of critical thinking skills is going to follow this dopey shit that he's saying, right? And so, it's a complete mess, right? And it's just there for anybody to see. And now all this literature, all this stuff with Charges being purged out and all these things. And so I've done what I can. Like I've done, with basically no support from pretty much anybody in the organization, in terms of like what I'm doing here. And it's just been a, kind of a hassle for me to fulfill some sort of obligation and duty I owe to the world and, and the organization, what's left of it, because of, all the things that the previous masters of the system, particularly Chariji and, of course, Babaji laying the foundation, but how I've been blessed. They've blessed me with whatever I've experienced spiritually. And so, I owe something, right? And so I'm doing my best, but, what can I do? Like, it's just, a sea of lies that are there. Like he just rewrites history. And so, there's no, nobody knows what to do. Obviously, people are struggling with what he's doing, but they can't come up with a solution because he's the legitimate master of the system, and he's created this, parasitic organization called Heartfulness, and now it's, it is whatever it is. Anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paramount, definitely important for the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day, and be grateful.